Talk about submitting after the fact proposals in Cayuse SP. The first thing that I want to do before we get too far into class is to talk about what our learning objectives for the day are. What I hope that you're going to get out of this morning is that you're going to know the definition of what an after the fact proposal is, or what we refer to as ATFs and sponsored programs. I also hope that you'll understand when an ATF proposal should be submitted to our office for review and approval, and also that you'll know when you're submitting that to us what components are required, and that you'll be able to submit an ATF to our office. The outline for this morning is, first we're going to look at Zoom for a moment, and then we're going to get an overview of the program, of what an ATF is. We'll talk about the requirements. We'll go through submitting an ATF, and we'll have a little bit of an ending where we'll have a Q&A period, and we'll also look at any resources if there is time available for that. However, if we don't get to the resources section, please don't worry, because I'm going to send you a PDF of today's presentation after class, as well as any other follow-up materials that we identify. All right, so let's look at Zoom. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly just to get us set up in Zoom. If you have any questions, please do let me know, but I think we've probably all been using Zoom quite a bit. If you haven't yet, please select your participants list. On your participant, once you do that, you'll get the participants to the right. You'll see yourself, my name, and some others as well. We have 20 people in addition to myself this morning. It's a really, really great number. Can't say how excited that makes me. All right, underneath that, you'll see some ways that you can interact with me. Feel free to use those interactions, but do know that since I'm sharing my PowerPoint, I may not see them right away. If you really want to get my attention, I suggest that you send a chat message, because I tend to be able to pick up on those really quickly, or go ahead and unmute yourself. But again, remember, you may be recorded, and I may not be able to get that out of the recording that I put on YouTube. From there, there are some additional ones. If you have a more button, you may see a few more options as well, or there may be something called reactions down in the bottom of your, or wherever your toolbar is for Zoom. Select the chat box so that you can chat with us. I hope that you'll all open that up, because we will use that today. And if you like, you can start or stop your video. You can also mute or unmute yourself. I ask that you mute yourself if you're not speaking. That will just help mitigate any feedback. I went through that really quickly because I think we've all been using Zoom for quite a while now. If you have any questions on that, please let me know right now. You can chat them privately to me, or you can chat them to everyone, because if you have the questions, someone else may as well. I do want to practice one of the features that we're going to use today, because it's going to be an activity, and I want to make sure you can do it before we get there. Someone's already done it. If you know how to do it, go ahead and do it. You don't have to wait for me to describe this, because it'll help us move on quicker. So if you don't know how to do this, we're going to annotate. At the top of the screen that I'm sharing with you, select View Options, and then select Annotate. From there, select a stamp or something else, and put that stamp in the box or anywhere else on the page. And I see everyone's doing that really well. So now what you may want to do, though, is go ahead and click that close button, or the X on your annotate after you've annotated, because I've learned that if you don't do that, whenever you go to use your mouse, it'll keep annotating. So once you've done your annotation, you may want to go ahead and close that. That way, if you try to chat or something, it doesn't mess you up. All right. Let's talk about what ATFs are and when you need to submit them to our office, because not every ATF or after the fact proposal needs to be submitted to sponsored programs. First, though, let's look at what an ATF is. An ATF is when a PI receives extramural funding that hasn't gone through our office but should have. That shouldn't happen. And I can think of so many reasons why that shouldn't happen. And we'll talk about what we review, which kind of explains why we shouldn't do that. However, there are some cases when ATFs are appropriate, or when they happen because it's out of our control or out of your control as a contract and grant administrator. What an ATF can look like is that maybe there was no proposal. So it's an ATF can look like there's no proposal at all. So your PI just straight up receives funding that you were not expecting, funding that didn't require any proposal materials. Maybe they have a contact out at a corporation, and that person is like, hey, I'll give you funding, you do really neat work, but it does come through with some strings attached. So it would be a grant or a contract and not a gift. That would be an ATF, and that would be appropriate. That's when we might see an ATF that's out of our control, and that's completely appropriate. We don't want to turn down funding. Also, it could be maybe they submitted a letter of intent that wasn't required to come through our office. And it doesn't require any additional proposal materials from them to that sponsor, but maybe there was an LOI that might be seen as an ATF in some cases. Also, it could be that the PI submitted directly to the sponsor and didn't go through our office when they should have, and then they're getting funding. So that's also an ATF. You would consider it an ATF even before that funding comes through, but Sponsored Programs isn't going to look at it until you get an award. And we'll probably talk about that in a little bit more detail. And thank you for that. We appreciate it. All right, so now let's look at the application process, because the application can come in multiple phases. And I want to talk about this because I mentioned that letter of intent. But also what I really want to point out is just because something's called a letter of intent or a concept paper or a white paper, it does not mean it doesn't come through Sponsored Programs. There are different phases of the proposal process, and it can involve one or more of these steps. First is that letter of intent, and that's going to be some basic information, and the sponsor might use this to manage their review process. They might be setting up their review committees and determining who's going to be their reviewers based on that information. Also, it's important to know that unless a budget is required, it doesn't actually need to come through our office. So you're only going to submit a letter of intent to Sponsored Programs if it requires a budget or agreement to some terms and conditions at that phase. Otherwise, it doesn't actually need to come through our office. You would just submit that directly to the sponsor. But if you're required to provide a number, like a budget number or anything else, you want to bring that to our office through Cayuse SP. Same with the pre-proposal. If you're submitting a pre-proposal, most likely this is going to come through Sponsored Programs, but it might not. If there's no budget required, no number, like no amount that's being requested, and there's no requirement of agreement to terms and conditions at that stage, then you're not going to need to submit that through our office. But most likely you will, because there's likely going to be some terms, there's likely going to be a budget required at least. Or institutional endorsement. If it requires institutional endorsement or approval, it's going to come through our office. The full proposal most likely is, well, it's always going to come through our office. And if you're getting an ATF, it's most likely at that stage. But I want to really, remind you that you're not going to submit that to our office unless you get that award in hand. Okay. It's still considered an ATF. All of these things we talked about are ATFs, regardless as if they're going to come through our office or not. However, it's important to know them. I want you to know what an ATF is, regardless if you submit it to Sponsored Programs. So what I would like you to do is use the Annotate feature, and based on the explanations I've just given you, put a stamp in the rectangle that's next to the box if you think that that would meet the definition of an after-the-fact award or an after-the-fact proposal, regardless of if it requires post-submission. So take a few moments and just kind of complete these boxes. Use your Annotate feature. If you don't remember how to do that, it was View Options, Annotate, and go ahead and start clicking in the boxes, and there are multiple correct answers. Okay, so this is good. I see y'all are all answering the questions. The answers, you only missed one though, because I was trying to point out that even when you don't submit an ATF to our office, it's still an ATF, even at that proposal stage. So the only one that everyone didn't select was this proposal submitted to Sponsored Programs that was not funded. That's still an after-the-fact proposal, but you don't need to submit it to our office, if that makes any sense. There's no reason to do anything with that because it's already been submitted and there's really no action on it. All right, so thank you. And we are going to move on a little bit and talk about some concerns with submitting an after-the-fact proposal. I've already said that we should try to avoid these because they can really present some issues for us. First of all, once they're awarded, there might be some terms and conditions that are not acceptable. They might not be acceptable to the principal investigator, to UC Davis, or to the UC Regents. And therefore, there was a lot of time and effort wasted on that principal investigator and maybe your part as a department administrator if you helped with that submission. Also, the budgets could be incorrect. There could be an incorrect F&A or facility administration or indirect cost rate applied. The base could be wrong. The indirect or F&A cost base that was used could be wrong. And other calculations could be incorrect, or maybe some cost might even not be allowable. Also, if you don't run this through the correct channels, the department or the college might not be supportive of this proposal, or of this award, I should say, at that time. It's important to note that when you submit an internal processing form in Cayuse SP, one of the things that's happening in there is you're getting that approval by your department chair and sometimes by your dean if you are involving the School of Medicine or the School of Vet Med. So you want to keep these things in mind. It's really important. Now we're going to do another little activity. I'm going to launch a poll, and it'll show up for you in just a moment. And once this shows up, if you could go ahead and answer these 3 true or false questions. And these are statements, right? So the question is, when does SPO review an after the fact proposal? Select true or false for each of these 3 statements. And once I see everyone's responded or enough of the class have responded, we'll go ahead and I'll share the results and then we'll discuss the answers. Your answers are anonymous, but I can see the number or the percentage of people that have answered a question. So yes, you would submit an IPF to sponsor program if the PI receives an award agreement without submitting a proposal to them. You would definitely submit that to us. The second one is false. Submit an internal processing form to SPO if the PI submitted a proposal directly to Widgets LLC but has not been informed of the funding decision. Now, this is somewhat of I don't know if it's a true change in our process, but we used to allow submission of ATFs at that proposal stage before they were funded. Now we don't do that because there's no reason for us to review that proposal. It's already being submitted to the sponsor, and we're not going to do any work on it until we get an award. So there's really nothing to review. At that stage, it's already been submitted. There's nothing we can do about it. It shouldn't have been submitted, but there's nothing that we can do about it. And the second one is true, which most of you got as well. So submit an IPF to SPO if the PI has submitted a proposal directly to Widgets LLC 3 months ago and received a draft award agreement. So yes, you would then submit that to our office because in that case, you've got that award agreement even though it's a draft, and you know that they want to fund the project. So then it's time for us to start work. And I really wanted to quiz you on this because we used to allow those submissions before that funding decision had been made. And it just created extra work for you to have to submit that internal processing form, prepare it, get the approvals, and for us to review it. And when there may not be an award that comes from that. Someone's asking me if I'm going to talk about ATFs versus JITs. I wasn't, but I can do that right now. So that's two very different things. And after the fact are these things we just talked about. And after the fact is when you actually have an award, but we haven't reviewed it in sponsored programs. You have an award in hand that sponsored programs needs to review, regardless of if you submitted that to the sponsor already or not. A just-in-time or a JIT is this in-between period. So a JIT is when you've submitted a proposal to a sponsor, usually through our office, as you should have, and then that sponsor requests some additional information before they make a funding decision. That's a JIT, and those need to come through our office as well, but you don't submit a separate internal processing form for that. Either the sponsor will let us know, or you or the PI can email us at proposals@ucdavis.edu and let us know that there's a just-in-time request, providing that Cayuse SP proposal number, and we'll process it from there. We use the same internal processing form. I hope that answers the question. If it does not, please let me know. But that's the difference in a just-in-time, so that's that in-between period, and an ATF, which is an after the fact. And you have to love our alphabet soup, our acronym soup. Somebody called it that one day, and I just think that's so true. It's acronym soup. We could speak in acronyms all day. All right, so I don't see any more questions. I don't see anybody telling me to slow down or go faster. I'm gonna keep going. Let's talk about what is required when you're submitting that after the fact to us. Even though you have an award in hand, you're submitting an ATF proposal. You're submitting it to us for review. Although it will go to the awards team and not the proposals team, we still have to do this for review. The process is that you submit an internal processing form for routing and approval. We'll do our review and we'll review the proposal documents that you provide, and I'll tell you what we need on the next slide, and also a draft award agreement. Now, when you're providing the proposal documents, and I talk about our minimum documents, it's also anything else you've provided or that the sponsor's requesting. We need to review all of that. We will work with the department to collect any needed information. We'll perform any negotiations with the sponsor as required, and we'll fully execute that award. We'll endorse it and all of that in Cayuse just as we would. So even though this is an after the fact proposal or award, you're still gonna have an internal processing form and an award that's required for all of our awards. Let's talk about what we actually need at this stage though. At this stage. So what we need that completely routed and authorized internal processing form. Your lead principal investigator and all of your co-principal investigators have to certify that before we can assign it to an awards analyst for review. And it also must have all of the appropriate internal processing form authorizations. We need a budget spreadsheet and budget justification, which we strongly encourage even if the sponsor doesn't require it. We need a scope of work or an abstract. And in this case, it does need to be final. When you're submitting a regular proposal to us, it may not need to be final because we don't have an award. In this case, we have an award. And then we need that draft award agreement. You're only gonna be submitting this to us if you have a draft award or a notice of award, something telling us that that award well, we need the award so that we can review it and perform those negotiations. We also need any internal documents that might be required. This could be letters of support for cost sharing commitments. It could be an exception to principal investigator status. If your principal investigator does not have PI status based on university policy, you must submit a form to get that approved for them to serve as a PI on that award. And we may need some informed participation or special individual agreements that we will ask for this. Sponsor programs will ask for these if required, as well as if they're IRB. If you have human subjects or vertebrate animal subjects, we will need a protocol certification form, and we'll request that and provide the form to you as well. Also, because this is at the award stage, all of the financial conflict of interest requirements must be performed. The proposal and award stage are listed here because you would need to take care of all of them. If you are submitting if you have an award from the National Science Foundation, CIRM, or UCOP special programs, you'll do a form 800. However, if it's an award from a public health sciences or services agency, such as the National Institutes for Health, the PIs will need to do this PHS conflict of interest form and online training as well. At the award stage, because that's where we're at in these cases, you also need to do this form 700. Your PIs, not you as a department admin, is required to do a form 700U by the state of California for any awards from non-governmental sources that are not on the exempt list, and that's on the Research Compliance and Integrity or Conflict of Interest website. There'll be linked to that on the next slide as well as in our resources. And then if there are any positive disclosures, they're also required to do the Statement of Economic Interest supplemental form. These financial conflict of interest disclosures are filed online in the eCOI system. There's a link to that in our resources section. The investigator must initiate it and submit it, but they can establish one admin contact out in their department that can assist with the preparation of this form. Do not ever list the sponsored programs analyst as the admin contact. We have access in a separate way, and listing us there can affect our access levels. If you need help, you can contact the conflict of interest group that's outside of sponsored programs. They're part of the Office of Research, but not part of sponsored programs. And they can be contacted at o_COI@ucdavis.edu. All right, so let's do annotate again. And if you could go ahead and indicate with a stamp what is required when you submit that ATF to us. All right, so I did just get a question that I'll address in a moment, but let's look at this real quick. Yes, everything is required. You can see my little stamps there with my paw print, I hope, and that means that all of these things are required. Somebody asked me if this is submitted as an internal processing form through Cayuse SP, and the answer is yes. So this first box up here, I say complete and routed internal processing form. That's the internal processing form in Cayuse SP. And we're gonna go through doing that a little bit later. The next thing we're gonna do is actually talk about the process for doing that. And let me just make sure that is the IPF? Yeah, so the IPF is submitted through Cayuse SP. IPF stands for Internal Processing Form, and in Cayuse it's also called a proposal, but I like to think of it as just the Internal Processing Form because that's that first document that you complete, and then everything you attach to it is the complete proposal. Once the Internal Processing Form is submitted for routing, it will route to the principal investigator and the co-PIs for certification. We will not assign it in sponsored programs for review until that has been obtained, as well as the authorizations from the unit heads of the involved units. It will be the administering unit of the award and the home unit of the key personnel of the award, as well as the dean's offices if the School of Medicine or School of Vet Med are involved. And once all of that has been received, we will assign it with the minimum documents that I already mentioned. We will assign it for review and sponsored programs, and then we'll do the approval, and I already showed the process. We'll negotiate the award and accept that on behalf of the UC Regents, and then set up the award. So the difference in a proposal and an award, one of the differences are, the difference in like a regular proposal and then the award coming through and submitting an ATF is that the entire proposal and award gets assigned to our awards team because there's already this award in hand. What I want to do now, I know that some people may not be that familiar with Cayuse SP, so I actually want to show a video of how you enter a proposal in Cayuse SP.
To create a proposal or internal processing form in Cayuse SP, select Start New Proposal. Enter the basic or general information of the proposal, starting with the sponsor. If the sponsor is not included on the list, be sure to try searching a couple different ways. However, if you still do not find the sponsor, select Miscellaneous Sponsor, and in the Submission Notes tab, give us the information we need regarding the sponsor. After entering or finding the sponsor and selecting their name, enter the sponsor's opportunity number, if applicable. From here, you would enter the program name at the sponsor, if there was one, and you would give us the URL for the sponsor guidelines for this specific program. If the sponsor is flow-through, enter the prime funding agency. You will only do this if this is for flow-through funding, such as when UC Davis is the subrecipient institution. Then you will find your administering unit of the project. Enter the primary administrative contact, which is usually yourself, but it may be somebody else. This is a person-sponsored program should contact if they have questions regarding the proposal. And here you will enter the project name, the short project name. So this will be the sponsor deadline, followed by the PI's last name and the sponsor. Then select the proposed project start date and end date. the activity code, the type of proposal, the instrument type, how you plan to submit the proposal to the sponsor, and again, enter the sponsor deadline. In our case, this is October 5th. We want you to enter this in military time. And here you can enter the full project title and select Save. Once you select Save, you will get the rest of the tabs for the IPF or the proposal. Complete each of the tabs. The only one that's not required is submission notes. Once all of the tabs have been completed, select Submit for routing.
Let's move on. Let's talk about some key differences and when you're submitting after the fact proposals versus a regular proposal that's at the regular proposal stage. It hasn't been submitted to the sponsor yet. There's no award in hand. We looked at just now, and I tried to point out a few videos or we looked at a video just a moment ago, and I tried to point out some of those differences while we were watching it, but not throughout the whole thing because I didn't want to interrupt you. Let's look at I want to talk about the general tab first. That was that first tab in my video that I showed you. You select Start New Proposal and you complete the general tab. After you complete that general tab and select Save, you get the rest of your tabs as I indicated in the video. When you're in that general tab, some of the key differences when you're submitting after the fact proposal are in the bullet points, the fields that I've bolded here. The short title is going to be different. It's going to say ATF. And then if you have a Cayuse project number, sometimes you've contacted your awards analyst, you've been in contact with them, or maybe your awards analyst receives a notification for some reason, and they've gone ahead and created a Cayuse SP project. In that case, we'll give you a number. And you'll say ATF, and then you'll put the number, if you know it, the analyst you're working with, INSPO, if you know it, and the project name. If you do not have an assigned analyst yet, you don't have a Cayuse project number, you can just say ATF and the project name. You could put 4 awards if you want, but that's not necessary. The proposal type is going to be after the fact instead of new or anything else. The submission method is going to be paper, even though it's really not necessarily. And then you'll provide the sponsor's contact information in the pop-up that you'll see when you select paper. That would be the person's name and contact information, phone number, email that we should be dealing with in sponsored programs regarding that award. For the sponsor deadline, it should be at least 7 business days from the current date. If the sponsor is giving you a specific date, you can indicate that in there. And then the full project title, go ahead and repeat the short title or the short project name. The thing is on our list, when we search, we see the full project title. So if you just go ahead and do both in both places, you know that we'll see it really quickly when we're assigning it. It'll help us in the assignment process. Otherwise, we have to open up a few more things and do a little bit more digging. This is all in the handbook for department, contract, and grant staff, PIs, and approvers that you can find on the Spark training page. There's a direct link to it here, and again, you will get a PDF of today's presentation. And in the proposal attachments, you're going to upload the proposal documents that we talked about, at least those minimum documents for assignment, although your sponsor may have requested some additional information. We need the draft award agreement, and then upload any other communication you've had with that sponsor regarding what they need, when it's due, what the award financially will look like, etc. Things that will aid in our review. Now, are there any questions? Because what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go into our test instance, and we're going to create an after-the-fact proposal. So there's a question of how do you get a Cayuse project number if it's not submitted yet? You won't. You'll get it if you've already talked to the awards analyst. So if the sponsored program's awards analyst for some reason was notified of that award, we may reach out to you and go ahead and create a Cayuse project number, and then that awards analyst will give you that number in your communication with them. Oftentimes that won't happen. There's no need to do that there's no need to really reach out until you submit that internal processing form if you have an award in hand. But sometimes that happens. I think maybe just some people prefer to talk to awards before they start working on it. You don't have to. There's absolutely no need for that. But if you do, provide us that Cayuse SP project number. So that's the question. You will not. Good question. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is in the chat box, I am going to upload a scope of work, some instructions, and a budget. And what you're going to do is you're going to take, let's see, all you need are you need the instructions. You need the scope of work, and you need the budget. And then what you'll do is you'll open an internet browser, preferably use Mozilla Firefox, but you could also use Chrome. That seems to work fine for me. And you're going to go to the link I just put in your chat box. It's our test environment. And everyone's going to log in as the same person. Our username is AmyAdmin, AMIEADMIE. And our password is going to be training, all lowercase. So what I would like you to do is go ahead and, based on those materials that I've provided you, log into the test environment with the information in your chat box and start creating an internal processing form for this after the fact award based on the information that I've given you. I'm also going to attach board agreement as well into the chat. All right, everybody. So it's 10:17 and we're going to go ahead and take a look at this internal processing form. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this with you. One of the key things, or the sponsor here was Patch's Coffee Fund. And if anyone's curious, it's the name of my cat. I did not give you a funding opportunity number or a sponsor program name or a URL, so you would have left all of that blank. But what you would do in this case is you would attach any communication you've had with the sponsor about what they need. That way we know exactly what we need to submit. Our admin unit was ecology. Put the primary admin contact as myself. I did that because I prepared this proposal. I want to say actually that's a new field, relatively new, and you could put your name there and I can actually see it on the list as well. So if you can find your name, you can select it and put your name there, and that also lets me know you completed this proposal. So you have 3 options of letting me know you did it. The proposal owner saved is Amy after I saved the proposal because I created this as Amy. And I have my short project name, which I did a little different this time, but there's my project name. I've got my project start and end dates. I did the activity code as basic because that's most of the work we did. If you didn't know, you could have taken a guess or put something else. The proposal type is after the fact. The instrument type is a contract. I said the submission method was paper, and this is who I'm going to contact. I don't remember if I put that information there for you. So you may or may not have had all of the information for these fields, but I want to go through it all with you anyways. It's very common that you're going to get it from your PI and you're going to need more information. So this also points that out, that you may not have everything you need. The other thing I want to say is never pair with 424. Once you selected save, you would have got the green check marks. We have our investigators, which are going to be our key personnel. And then I also always encourage you to add yourself if you need access to that award. Very likely if you're submitting an ATF, you're going to need access to that award. So a good thing to do is to add yourself. That way you're going to automatically have that. And today we're all Amy. So I'm just going to select in that last name field and I'm going to find Amy. And I'm going to add her with 0% effort. And I'm going to change her role to proposal editor because that's going to let me know that she only needs that edit access. It's also going to mean that it won't route to sponsored programs for her review, for her approval, so, or for their approval, because you'll see, well, I already added Cassie, but Amy, I'm pointing, I guess you can't see my finger. So Amy here and Cassie, these are proposal editors. And this means that it's not going to route to their unit for approval, but they're going to have edit access to the proposal, and they're going to be able to view any award that's created off of it. So that's just good practice. It's just good practice to do. The budget, you may or may not have gotten all the way through. I know that it takes some time to enter these internal processing forms, but we always only need a summary budget whenever you're submitting your internal processing form to us. We will create the detailed budget, but we only need a summary budget. We had one number of budget periods. Is that correct? I think I did a 1-year project. And so that should be, that would have auto-populated your entire project fields, because you have only one project or only one project period. So you only have to complete that first field. Another area that's different, I'm not going to go through every tab. So if you have a tab that you specifically want me to go through, please put it in chat and I'll make sure to do that. But one that is, I'm going to just kind of point out some differences. These were normal. These are exactly how you would do it with any other proposal, but except for the ATF and you know, some of those instructions on the general tab. The other thing that's different, I think it's in this, I think it's the special interest tab. Let's see how good my memory is. I'm correct. So on the special interest tab, something that's different when you're submitting an ATF is this number 5 is going to be, yes, you're going to have a draft agreement to fund this project. So look out for that. You don't need to submit it to us if you don't have that draft agreement or that draft award. Remember, it's not going to, there's no point. There's nothing that needs to be reviewed at that stage. Something else I'll point out, just because it's something that I think people miss a lot on even regular internal processing forms, is this location of sponsored activities. It won't let you proceed unless this equals 100%. So I have 100%, right? I've got 75% in store hall and then 25% in some to be determined out of country location. That gives me my 100% and I can move on. Something that people often miss is if you're doing work, if you're using one of these ORUs or special research programs or core facilities, you want to indicate how much work is being performed over there as well, as part of that 100%. That way they also get this in their reports and everything. We can see what's being done in some of these centers. So that's a good one to include as well.
Cassie, can I ask a question real fast?
Sure.
So back on the indirects or the budget tab.
Yes.
Do we need to update the indirects if 25% of the time is off campus? Do we break that?
Probably not, because even though that's 25% in another location, it may not affect the indirects, because it's the FNA rate is not, you can have work in other places, but often it's, you know, you're using the resources of our campus and things like that. There's a lot more that goes into it, and it's got to be like a significant amount of the work. And how do you define that? You know, it can be complicated. So if you're not really sure if you should ever use like off campus rate versus on campus rate, it's good to contact proposals at ucdavis.edu and have that discussion.
Okay, thanks, Cassie.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Crystal, you know, you say, isn't it if it's under 50%, it's on campus, right? Yes and no. Like, it depends. It's not a hard and fast rule, but if we saw something under 50%, we would definitely question it more than something probably at 50% or more. But the off-campus, on-campus thing, it's such a great question, because it's a little bit gray, and I'm glad that you asked it. It's a really, really good question. And Crystal, I like your suggestion of the under 50%, but remember that that may not be a hard and fast rule. Yeah, thank you. We have that discussion a lot, so I'm not surprised that it came up here. All right. And I'm glad yeah, that's great. So the other thing are the proposal attachments. And I said, you know, you didn't need to upload all of these because I think most of us have uploaded documents in Cayuse. But I do want to point out that you'll see when I uploaded this ATF award, I'm going to annotate this here, that I chose, so I uploaded my draft award agreement, that Word doc that I gave you, and the file type is ATF. That way we know right away, like, oh, here's that draft award for us to look at. And you'll notice that everything else is pretty much the same. Now, I didn't give you all of these documents. I gave you the scope of work, the budget, and the award agreement. So if you uploaded anything, it would have been those three things. I also uploaded a budget justification and some emails from the sponsor that I have, just to show you that you would also be uploading that information as well. And you'll see that I've chosen the appropriate types. And you can change the access here if you want. You can select all parties, and it will allow you to change the access. So right now, anyone who has access to this proposal can view that document. You could change it to where you had only the lead PI, the IPF creator, and maybe the unit approver and administrators. And now you're not taking away the admin office review. You can't change that. Sponsored programs can always view it, but this can be changed. Maybe your PI does not want the budget to be shared with everyone that is on that investigators research team tab for some reason. You can adjust those. And you can also delete documents now. Another important thing are these approving units. And you'll see here we only have one, so it's pretty easy. We'll say authorized unit listing. I still can't submit for routing because the PI hasn't done, in my example, I like to, once I have an IPF done, I would email Charlie as the PI and say, hey, Charlie, please review proposal number 21-0045 and complete the financial conflicts of interest tab, make any necessary changes. They say yes here, save, and then they'll get the submit for routing tab. And once they do that, they can submit for routing, and then they can certify their proposal as appropriate as well. So that brings us to the closing of our class, which again is going to be another time for you to ask me any questions, but I'm sharing my PowerPoint again. So remember that I may not see if you raise your hand or something. Chat, please, or unmute yourself. I actually we're going to do this poll again. I just think it might be interesting to see. I would like to see how you would answer the poll that we did earlier. All right, so it looks like everyone has answered. I'm so happy. Y'all are such a participatory group. This is great. Okay, so let's look and see. All right, yay. Okay, I'm gonna share these results and we'll go over them real quick. All right, so yes, number one is correct. We would submit an IPF to SPO if the PI receives an award agreement from Widgets LLC without having submitted a proposal. We're going to submit an internal processing form in Cayuse SP to sponsored programs. Could we have any more acronyms in there? Yes, we could. I think I could say that with a lot more acronyms, at least one more. All right, the second one is false, and only a couple people thought that this might be true. So in this case, you're not going to submit to us because a funding decision has not been made yet. If this proposal gets funded, go ahead and submit it to us at that point because you always want to have that award agreement in hand. It's still an after the fact. It's just not one that you would submit yet. If you do submit it to us, we're just going to return it to you. It's a waste of your effort, but it's not really gonna hurt anything necessarily. It's just wasted time that you don't need to do yet. And number three is correct. You're gonna submit an internal processing form if you have that award agreement in hand. So wonderful. Thank you so much. That makes me feel really good about this morning's class because we're ending early and I wanted to make sure I wasn't rushing through things. All right, so what I hope you learned today, I hope you know the definition of an ATF. I hope you know when to submit that to our office for review, which our last poll let me know. I think you do. I also hope that you know what's required when to submit it to our office, but this is on our website, so don't stress if you're not sure or if you forget. I always say read the guidelines, and you can tell there. We'll have it for you. And then I also hope that you'll be able to submit an ATF to our office.